For more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mandel. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. With Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mandel, here for the next couple hours, all about the Winnipeg Jets. Tons to talk about, especially in light of the worst kept secret in hockey becoming front and center, that being Pierre-Luc Dubois' trade demand. In addition, in the bottom of hour number 2, in about 90 minutes time, we're thrilled to welcome Jets defenseman Dylan Samberg to the show. So lots to get to, lots to talk about on this Saturday morning. Dave, Ezzy, gentlemen, good to see you both. Ezzy, that was the best time we've spent together in a long, long time last night at the football game.
Yeah, I would agree. It was really to show the public, the fans, that we actually do hang out together outside of the show, right? Like,
that's
people
right.
were asking, they didn't believe us. They're like, there's no possible way that you guys hang out in your free time. But little does some people know that we were season ticket holders back in the old days of the Canadian Stadium. But huge win for the Bombers. We had a great time. Saw Huss, saw our boy Isha Boy Bruce, who's a regular in the IC Hockey Show and IC post-game chat. Saw a lot of people. Saw Carter Chen. Shout out to him. Saw lots of good people out there. Really good crowd. It was a beautiful night. It was a little bit too close. Like, we were laughing, like, that game, the score really flattered the Ticats because the Bombers were up like 28 or 29 points at the half. But yes, it was an enjoyable evening. And I enjoy spending time together with you, in a couple years.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much, Dave. I'm sure we'll get an opportunity where we'll spend some quality time with you out in public, but there wasn't going to be last night, I'm afraid.
That's okay. I was okay to let you guys have your evening. You two lovebirds have your evening together. I was all good.
There you go. Okay, thank you for taking the high road on this matter. That's very generous of you.
Oh, more importantly, very happy to report John Chen in Singapore got his Jets merch safe and sound. I was a little concerned, I'm not going to lie. John's was the farthest destination that we sent merch to, and so good to hear that John received his Jets merch safely in Singapore. So glad to hear it, and thanks for being patient with me, John.
There you go. Exactly.
Dave, you only shipped that out back in mid-November, so it's a really quick turnaround.
I'd love to say I did. I'd love to say I did, Ez, but it was maybe a little bit delayed, just a smidge.
There you go. So nonetheless, John got the merchandise, so that's the important part. In any event, let's get into it with lots to talk about regarding the Winnipeg Jets. As the few weeks worth of a lull in news ended this week when, as I mentioned, the worst kept secret in the world saw the light of day, with Pierre-Luc Dubois through his agent indicating to the Winnipeg Jets that he has no interest in maintaining his status as a member of the Winnipeg Jets, which again has been talked about, has been expected, has been rumored for many, probably at least over a year now, at least back to last offseason when there was no long-term contract to sign. And now the Jets are up against it. They have this very narrow window of time now where they now have to figure out what to do with Pierre-Luc Dubois, have to figure out how to possibly recoup a reasonable return for the young centerman. The question I have for you guys is this, in your opinion, another instance of the Jets failing to act in a timely manner? Another instance where their tendency to be reactive rather than proactive is going to end up, I don't know if the word costing them is the right terminology, but it's going to end up impacting the quality of return on a player like Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Now, there's no way, boys, that you can say that, Chevy has been proactive in this case, right? Because, these rumors have been around since this time last year, right? And that whole, Dubois drama at the draft with, him going to the draft with his bank and, him expecting to be traded to the Habs, right? Everybody remembers that. So, yeah, look, this is not a great position for the Jets and Chevy to be in. Obviously, you know, we expect Chevy to get a good return for Dubois. But, you know, for me, like, just stepping aside from, you know, the kind of debate about, you know, whether or not Dubois should have been traded earlier, right? Like, it's just unfortunate that, you know, this has happened again, right? Like, we've seen this with so many players, you know, whether it's Jacob Trouba or whether it's Patrick Laine. And it's really unfortunate that a player like Dubois, who's coming off such a monster season, and I realized that there were some stretches that, you know, Dubois struggled a little bit offensively, and he definitely, you know, was better in the earlier stages of the series against the Golden Knights in the first round, but he's still a beast when it comes to, you know, what he can do on the ice. He's a legitimate top 6 center, whether, you know, you want to call him a 1C or 2C, whatever. But you know, it's interesting, you know, what, and obviously Dave has been posting, there's been no shortage of articles, as a lot of people know, on this situation with, you know, guys like Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman chiming in. Pierre LeBrun had the LeBrun bomb, as you mentioned earlier this week. But I think it's really going to be interesting to see, you know, if he gets traded to the Habs or not, because, you know, Merrick says that, you know, there's no number 2, but then Merrick went on to list, you know, Dallas and Tampa Bay and Boston,
listed everybody,
right? And then Elliot even, you know, gave him a bit of a hard time and said, you just named half the league, right? But I mean, there's got to be multiple teams interested here, and you have to think that, you know, after this news came out, Dave, this wasn't the first time, you know, that we expected to hear that Chevy had been talking to, you know, the Habs and other teams. So we already thought there was a good chance that Dubois was going to be traded. And honestly, now it seems like he could be traded any day. Like Drew and I were talking about this at the Bombers game last night, actually. Like, a lot of people are thinking Dubois is going to be traded the week of the draft. I think he gets traded before that.
I do too. I think this trade could happen imminently. I mean, there's the sort of the multiple angles that are now being explored here, because, you know, Pat Brisson, the agent for Pierre-Luc Dubois, is working in tandem to some extent with the Winnipeg Jets and with whomever would be the acquiring team of Pierre-Luc Dubois to see if it's going to be if there's an opportunity for there to be a long-term contract involved. This is similar to what we saw happen, I guess, earlier this week with Damon Severson going from New Jersey to Columbus in a sign and trade. It was an 8-year deal that only New Jersey could sign him to those 8 years, and they facilitated a sign and trade. And I think for their efforts, they got a 3rd-round draft pick, if I'm not mistaken.
He was a UFA.
Yeah, he was a pending UFA, so there's a little bit different there, right? But last year with Matthew Tkachuk leaving Calgary, you know, his agent, you know, gave the Flames a list of teams that he would sign a long-term deal with. And then the Flames, I mean, we know that their season was not what they expected, and we know where Tkachuk and the Panthers currently are, down 2-1 in the Stanley Cup final. But you know, the return that the Flames got for Matthew Tkachuk was pretty decent. Huberdeau and Weegar. You know, I think people, if the Jets got a return like that, they would probably say, okay, you've salvaged a bit of a bad situation here. But so that's where they're at now. They're now at the point in time where they're no longer sort of playing, you know, footsie regarding if there's going to be a trade or if there's not going to be a trade. It's everybody is trying to now, you know, make that trade come to fruition. And the irony of the whole thing, as our friend Murad Atesh in The Athletic outlined very well, is that Montreal, you know, really doesn't have necessarily the best package for the Jets that the Jets would be interested among the teams that allegedly could be in. He goes through a list and he talks about the LA Kings being an option, and the Kings have a lot more interesting pieces, I would say, to maybe make a deal work than the Habs do. But with, you know, if Pierre-Luc Dubois is really only interested in going to Montreal, he and Brisson could really box the Jets in pretty significantly here, which goes to my comment about reactive instead of proactive. Well, you know, we saw it, Dave, that, you know, Pierre-Luc Dubois could sign an offer sheet.
Yeah.
On a 1-year contract. The Jets
wouldn't be able to trade him.
The Jets wouldn't be able to trade him. They'd, you know, if they choose not to match the offer sheet, then they could get, you know, maybe a 2nd-round pick back. Nothing extravagant by any stretch of the imagination. But the leverage is now not with Kevin Cheveldayoff.
No, you're right.
It's with Pierre-Luc Dubois and his representatives.
You are right, Drew. And that's why when the news came out that he was willing to at least say there's 5 or 6 teams that he's willing to sign that long-term deal with, that it alleviated a little bit for Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Jets, because look, he's already backed them into a corner, but that corner could have been even smaller had he not acknowledged that. Had he just said, basically, it's a Montreal or bust type situation, and Montreal knows, well, we don't have to give up anything anyways because we can get him for free, you know. And if you heard some of the deals coming out of Montreal, it was like here, we'll take Pierre-Luc Dubois for a bag of beans.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing because it's crazy to think that he had 63 points last year. It's not like he had 163 points. It's not like he had 100 points. I mean, he had 63 points.
He wasn't Matthew Tkachuk in Calgary the year before he got traded.
Yeah, which didn't he have 104 or something like that? Like that. It was, yeah, he had a monster year. So I'm just saying, like, it's funny how you're sitting there and you're like, it's not as if he's put a team on his back for an entire year and you're like, okay, this guy's worth it. You know, and it's interesting because Mike McKenna, obviously on Daily Faceoff, was talking about a guy who's already tried to get out of two cities and what that means for, you know, teams and a team's willingness to take, you know, a flyer on a guy, not necessarily the Philadelphia Flyers, but to take a flyer on a guy who's willing to work his way away from that team eventually and get to where he wants to go. Now, I understand that he's 1 year away from being able to choose his own destiny, but for me, it becomes really the situation is now giving the Jets a little bit of latitude, but not a lot. And I'm 100% on board with what Ez just said. You got to get it done now. There's no farting around. There's no, oh, well, we can put this one on the back burner, because you don't want to be in a situation where you have to decide between an offer sheet, which is going to be a low number, because I'm sure a team's not going to want to give up a lot. And then you can't trade the guy. And then you've just walked him to free agency, and you may as well just put a Habs jersey on him now. And it's going to make it an untenable year. I know you have that option, but to me, I know you have the option, but I'm saying you don't want that. You need Pierre-Luc Dubois gone. And we were of the belief anyways that of the four major, four components of this group, he was the first one to be gone. In my mind, probably the only one for sure that was going to be gone. Yep. But this to me is now a certainty.
Well, and boys, sorry, I was just quickly, Drew, I was just going to say, just sticking with the offer sheet. I'm not sure if you wanted to, pivot and go to something else here, but when you're talking about, when you're talking about the offer sheet, doesn't it make more sense to you guys? And I'd love to, hear people chime in on the chat as well. Like, doesn't it seem more likely that another team aside from the Habs would offer sheet Dubois? Because we know that most likely, Chevy and Kent Hughes have been talking regularly, right? Like, we know that they've talked before about Pierre-Luc Dubois, right? So it seems like unlikely that the Habs would offer sheet Dubois. And also, you would think that someone would offer, I think his qualifying offer is just over $6 million, right? And then you're getting into the third round pick situation. I don't know exactly what the number is, guys, but doesn't make sense for me for there to be a low ball offer here.
Well, the question is, how desperate is Pierre-Luc Dubois to not be a member of the Winnipeg Jets? Because if you heard what Pierre LeBrun was reporting, which was obviously what Pat Brisson was telling him, is that he has no interest in signing a qualifying offer. He has no interest in playing any more games for the Winnipeg Jets. He has no interest in kicking the can further down the road to the trade deadline. He wants out. He does not plan to be a member of the Winnipeg Jets come training camp. So if you're that committed to that, and if the Jets are being, stubborn with regard to making a trade, then and why wouldn't you go out and sign a 1 year offer sheet? No, there's obviously risk involved. It depends on how much risk you're willing to accept if you're Pierre-Luc Dubois. But if you're willing to accept, a fair bit of risk on a 1 year contract, and if you're willing to leave a little bit of money on the table, in that, he can go sign, I think, a $4.5 million 1 year offer sheet with the Montreal Canadiens. And if the Canadiens and if the Jets, don't match it, then they only get like a second round pick in return. And if the Jets do match it, well, then Pierre-Luc Dubois might have to hold his nose a little bit and be a member of the Jets. But the Jets then are not going to get anything else for him because they can't trade him for a calendar year. So it's again,
I feel like the Jets would not match an offer sheet under any circumstance.
It seems odd that it seems unlikely. I would agree that they would if the player is.
You're guaranteeing you have Dubois for the next year, but then you're also guaranteeing that you don't get anything in return. And to me, that's just unacceptable.
Well, but that's why he has all the leverage. He can go and do that if he wanted to. He could go and sign that offer sheet. And then the Jets would be stuck sort of accepting whatever, if they choose not to match, and based on let's assume that they don't, they're either going to get a second round pick or they might get a first round pick and a third round pick, depending on what the actual dollar figure of that offer sheet comes into. It just goes to my point, which I started the segment with. The leverage is not on the Winnipeg Jets side because I think they've overplayed their hand. There's a tipping point. The team, for the most, for the early part of a player's career, generally has all the leverage. The player's not UFA, is not a UFA. They're not eligible for unrestricted free agency. They only become eligible for arbitration at a certain point in time. And so for a lot of years, it's to the team's advantage. And then it used to be that when the player hits UFA, it becomes to the player's advantage. But players are now realizing that they can fast forward that scenario. They can get a little bit more aggressive with that when you're only a year away from UFA status. When you're, and that's where the Jets, I think, misplayed their hand. I think they thought they had another year to figure this out. And the Pierre-Luc Dubois, Pat Brisson, they're all saying, no, you don't. We've requested the trade. You've done nothing to acknowledge it. You've done nothing to accept it. Now we're going to sort of play the various trump cards, pardon the pun, that I have available for my player. And Kevin Cheveldayoff is trying to salvage a bad situation, but it's a bad situation that the team themselves, I think, have painted themselves into.
Absolutely. And one thing also to point out, I think you guys will remember, and some people might remember this, though, Aaron Portzline, good friend of the show, covers the Blue Jackets for The Athletic. Before the Dubois for Lionel Roslovic trade, there were the rumors that the Canadians, when Marc Bergevin was the GM, was going to offer sheet Dubois, right? So it's something that kind of the Habs have had in their back pocket, Dave, for a while. I don't know. I don't just reading the situation, it doesn't seem like the offer sheet from Montreal. I don't know about any other teams. Like, I know some people in the chat are talking about Carolina. Carolina is a really interesting team because we talked about the Hurricanes' need for some scoring help. We know their goaltending situation, right, with Kochetkov, but Antti Ranta and Freddie Anderson are obviously pending UFAs, right? So that would make sense for Hellebuck if the Jets are, listening on Hellebuck, which we don't really know, what the status of that is because we don't know the status of the contract negotiations, right?
As I got a little nug here from Pierre LeBrun's article, which just came out in The Athletic, and he said, because he added some stuff about Dubois and Hellebuck, the Dubois stuff was nothing really earth-shattering, but this is what he said about Hellebuck. And there should, talking about Scheifele and Hellebuck, saying odds are traded this summer, and there should be no confusion about whether Hellebuck has interest in signing an extension in Winnipeg. That ship has sailed. His next contract will be with a new team.
So when did this come out, Dave? Just now?
About an hour ago. I just saw it like a second ago.
See, that's huge. So that's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
That's the first time that we've ever heard from any of the insiders that there's no contract extension coming for Connor Hellebuck. And that obviously, Dave, indicates that, a trade would probably happen at some point before he becomes a UFA. I have no idea if that's going to happen, in the next few weeks or a few months, but that's absolutely huge news.
I want to.
No. I finally got to break it, not Drew.
The breaking news noise there. Let's back that up because that is absolutely, you're right, Ezzy. The first time we've heard that, and again, LeBrun is just a mouthpiece. LeBrun is just parroting whatever the agent is telling him. So don't get So let's just
or team.
Well, I mean,
I'm not saying he would do this. I'm saying, I agree, but I'm just saying with Hellebuck, with LeBrun, it could be team or agent, but sure.
Okay, so let's go through this one more time and maybe tweet this out, see if because I think a lot of people probably are going to be really curious about that exact quote from that article.
Writing an article for illegalcurve.com. Chill.
There you go. I know you are. So again, this is Pierre LeBrun this is LeBrun, Eric Duhatschek, and Michael Russo are the authors of this piece on theathletic.com, and it says there should be no confusion about whether Hellebuck has interest in signing an extension in Winnipeg. That ship has sailed. His next contract will be with a new team. So that is
he doesn't provide a source there, by the way.
No, I mean you've been around this game long enough, Ezzy. I've been around this game. Dave's been around this game long enough. We all know who these guys' sources are. It's player.
He's not going out with that without having a reliable source. I'm just saying we don't know it. Like Dave said, I mean, it could come from just someone else on another team, right? Like it could be an executive on another team that knows about that. I mean, that would be a little bit odd, but we just don't know. But regardless, the fact that was, put on, ink to paper, or, words to online reading platform is huge, right? And that makes you wonder, if we could see Dubois and Hellebuyck both traded before the draft starts in a couple weeks.
Well, I think that leaves it almost with no question that you now have. I mean, the draft is basically a little more than 2 weeks away. It's about 18 days away from now. And so now you have what I'm going to describe as clarity regarding the status of two of the big four. In Hellebuyck saying that he no longer wants to be a member of the Winnipeg Jets, or he has no interest in being a member of the Winnipeg Jets beyond this season.
Next year.
Yeah. And Dubois, who has no interest in being a member of the Winnipeg Jets as of today. So there's no rebuilding.
It's unfortunate news. Like, let's step back for a second here, because people are, I'm sure, already speculating about where Hellebuyck's going to end up. But it's really unfortunate, right? Like, Pierre-Luc Dubois has wanted out for a while. I mean, we've known that. He could have been traded a year ago. But it's really unfortunate when you think about, the season that Hellebuyck just had, right? Like, nobody's going to argue, with calling Hellebuyck the team MVP, right? Vezina finalist for the third time in 5 years. And it's really unfortunate. So I realize that, a lot of fans are going to be excited for the possible return and what the Jets could possibly acquire for Hellebuyck. But it's an end of an era. It's sad to see.
It is sad to see. But again, how did it get to this point? And that's something that, our buddy Mike McIntyre talked about in his column about the Pierre-Luc Dubois news is, are the Jets doing any introspection to try and find out how everything got to this point, how it got to be so poisonous that these guys don't even want to consider signing extensions here. And that's probably a topic for another day and time. But right now, it's evident that the Winnipeg Jets are going to be, in desperate need of a new goaltender, if not for this season, then for shortly thereafter. And if Connor Hellebuyck is indicating that he doesn't want to be here anymore, and I have no reason to doubt the article on its face, now what can the Jets recoup for him in a trade? You have a huge opportunity with Pierre-Luc Dubois. You have a huge opportunity with Connor Hellebuyck. I'd say you even have a greater opportunity now with Hellebuyck because,
no question,
because he hasn't boxed himself in to one team, being the front runner for his next services.
I wonder, boys, if Carter Hart is an option for the Jets. Like, we know that Philly recently acquired Cal Peterson from the LA Kings. So I think the writing on the wall, most people agree with Carter Hart. I mean, I think, it's been communicated by the Flyers and the insiders that a trade isn't imminent. But Dave, you wonder, are the Jets able to swing a trade for Carter Hart? Like, his numbers haven't been great, but the Flyers have been awful. And as far as I'm concerned, Carter Hart's an excellent goaltender and would be a great replacement for Hellebuyck.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, Ezzy, is that with what Drew just talked about was the fact that you're getting a king's ransom for Connor Hellebuyck. And to further the point Drew made, you're talking about not boxing him in. He wants to be a Stanley Cup champion. He's not like he's from Michigan. I'm sure he'd love to restore Detroit to their glory, but they're not there yet. So the fact of the matter is that unlike Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's basically got his eyes peeled on La Belle Province, I think that you've got Connor Hellebuyck saying, listen, I'm willing to go to where there's somewhere that is going to challenge for a Stanley Cup. Now, if you're the Jets, again, for a guy who's won a Vezina, who's been a finalist now 3 times, could win this year as well, which means he's a 2-time Vezina winner. I mean, here's a guy who has tremendous. I mean, in terms of what you can get. And look, the Jets are getting forced into this. This is not a Jets decision. If the Jets had their options, I'm sure they would, sign Connor Hellebuyck to a long-term deal, but they obviously won't have that sort of opportunity. And that's maybe based on what a lot of people are evaluating, a team that, sure, you were in first at one point, but you got into the playoffs at the 8th seed. And just by the skin of your head, hairy chin, as you got the hairiest chin on this show. But the fact of the matter is that this is a decision that ultimately it sucks because, look, you have a guy who wins the Vezina, but he artificially, it's like a little bit of a sugar high. He artificially inflates what this team can do quite often, night after night. And perhaps what this is going to do is force the Jets to make a trade to kind of retool, rebuild, restructure. I don't care which you use, but the fact is you're going to get a king's ransom for a Connor Hellebuyck and a lot more than you're going to get for a Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Sorry, I'm laughing at the comment that if the Jets really wanted Pierre-Luc Dubois, they would have taken him second overall. That's funny because nobody expected Pierre-Luc Dubois to go third overall after Matthews and Laine went 1-2, right, Dave? We were there in Buffalo. Everybody was expecting it to be Puljujarvi, and then, of course, he went fourth to Edmonton, right? But we all know if that draft was redone, Tkachuk would go first overall. That's right. I said it.
Well, you can deal with that on a different day and a different time. So just updating before we head to break for the first time this morning, Paul Edmonds is going to join us in the bottom of the hour in a couple minutes. We have the Pierre-Luc Dubois news, which of course we knew about earlier, this week, where he says he doesn't want to be a member of the Winnipeg Jets.
Are we going to see a breaking trade this morning, boys? Like, is this going to be like 2021 when Sarah came on and then Dubois was acquired by the Jets for Laine like 10 minutes later?
I don't think it's going to happen that quickly, but then it's an additional news, courtesy of The Athletic. The byline is credited to Pierre Lebrun, our good friend Eric Duhatschek, Michael Russo, saying there should be no confusion about whether Connor Hellebuyck has interest in signing an extension in Winnipeg. That ship has sailed. His next contract will be with a new team. So there you have it. Dubois likely on his way out. Hellebuyck likely on his way out at some point, and then the question still surrounding Scheifele and Blake Wheeler as the Winnipeg Jets off-season upheaval continues unabated.
What a time to be alive, right, boys?
Exactly. Breathe, take a deep breath of that fresh air. What a time to be alive. When we come back, Paul Edmonds joins us, Dylan Samberg at the bottom of hour number 2. Much more to come. It's a very busy Saturday edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Don't go anywhere. Bottom of hour number 1. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. We're thrilled to welcome to the program our very good friend, kind enough to interrupt his son's baseball game to join us on this Saturday morning. It's Paul Edmonds, the voice of the Winnipeg Jets on CJOB Radio. Paulie, good to see you, buddy. How are things?
Yeah, really good. I didn't interrupt the game though. They're continuing to play, so I'm just in the vehicle, so I don't have to talk over what's going on in the field, but love to talk hockey with you guys this morning.
Is that Nolan, your son Nolan, Paul?
Yeah, the youngest guy. Yeah,
right on.
Yeah.
There you go. Nice to see that he got some athletic talent nonetheless, despite his genetics. But that's good to see. We'll attribute that to the mom. I think, right?
Yes. Touche. Yes.
It's been too long. I haven't been able to give you the gears a little bit for a little while. So I gotta get back in at it. Yeah, Paulie, your reaction. I don't know if you have seen this. It just came out within the last 30 minutes or so. An article on theathletic.com, byline by Eric Duhatschek, Pierre Lebrun, and Michael Russo. And I'm going to read it to you for your reaction. Okay. Connor Hellebuyck. There should be no confusion about whether Hellebuyck has any interest in signing an extension in Winnipeg. That ship has sailed. His next contract will be with a new team. So pretty definitive words coming from 3 guys who certainly know what they're talking about.
Yeah, the dominoes are starting to fall here. And I think, is it shocking? No, but I think what it does is it does give you some clarity as to what's going to happen with this group here. Now you've got PLD that's asked probably to be moved before he has to play his last year of what is still an existing contract with the Jets. And now there's a 1 year left on the last term contract that Connor Hellebuyck has signed, and now he's looking to probably move along as well. And so what's the starting point for Kevin Cheveldayoff? Well, there's a number of them here, right? Like, you just don't know where to go. I mean, usually in these things, it's not, well, let's deal with this guy, then we'll deal with that guy. Usually these things are orbiting around at the same time. So, things got a little bit more complicated this morning with that announcement. But I don't think that anybody was surprised by that. This is sometimes, I don't think, a Winnipeg thing, but more of a Canada thing for some of these guys. And, it's unfortunate, but that's kind of the way it is. And I don't know that they're going to have a complete tear down, but it does look like there's going to be a number of core pieces that are going to be playing elsewhere than in Winnipeg that are still currently Winnipeg Jets when it comes to September, October, when the puck drops for real in 2023-24.
Paul, you mentioned PLD there, and obviously we don't know, if he's going to be ultimately traded to Montreal. That's what we've been hearing for over a year now. But when it comes to a trade, are you expecting a center to be coming back the other way? Because we've obviously been talking about this on the Saturday show for over a month now. Some people saying that, could there be a trade for a winger or a defenseman? Like for me, when you have that type of hole, when you trade Dubois, like obviously it's going to be tough to find a player, of Dubois' capabilities with just the power forward element and everything like that. But do you expect, regardless if it's 1-for-1, do you expect a center to be coming back to replace Dubois? Because obviously we know there's not a ton of players in the system that can, fill his skates, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know that if you're looking to get a frontline center or a 1A or a 2, a very close 2, if you're looking to give up another center, right? So, is Nick Suzuki available? No. So you're looking to kind of add on that depth chart there. Is Kirby Dach? I mean, he's been traded already and looks like he's found a home in Montreal. But I think what you're trying to do is look to say, okay, can we strengthen our center position? If we give up a center, that would be number one. If that doesn't check a box, then you're looking at, okay, where is another player or a position of need that we would require? Would it be a Caden Gooley, certainly on the back end? I mean, could we use that defenseman there? I think it's, okay, you look around and find, your suitable dance partner and then what they have available to you, and then the negotiations start. Would you love to get a center back? Of course you would. But I don't think that if you're Montreal trying to strengthen your center position, then you're turning around and giving up a 1 or 2 center as well, right? So I don't think it really starts and ends there, Ezzy. But at the same time, what you're doing is looking to not, strengthen other areas, but have a deficiency in the middle of the ice, because it's such an important position. So I think that maybe if it's Montreal, and it could be the New York Rangers or anybody else, the Boston Bruins, those have been rumors as well. If you don't get a center in that particular maneuver and negotiation, then maybe you look down the road and something else to strengthen that center position when you maybe divest yourself of another asset. So to answer your question succinctly, I don't think it's center for center. I think it would be probably Pierre-Luc Dubois for what you can get best back that's going to fit your organization now and also into the future.
Paul, do you think it's time for the organization to trust the fan base and say, listen, like, you are sophisticated enough to understand that we need to go to the Jets 3.0 version. We've tried it with this core. And you know what? This team, I mean, again, my opinion, when this team was working hard with the role players they brought up and the guys, everybody kind of on the same page in February or in January when there were all those injuries, people responded to that team. Do you think it's time for the organization to recognize we tried it with these guys? In some instances, they don't have a choice because Pierre-Luc Dubois has said what he said. But do you think it's time for them to say, listen, the fan base is going to trust that there is a vision here and we need to let them understand what that vision is?
I agree with you. I think that we are sophisticated and very educated when it comes to hockey, but not necessarily on the ins and outs of what goes on in running a National Hockey League team and behind the scenes. There's an old saying, and I'll bring it into the equation here. When you start listening to the fans, next thing you know, you're sitting beside them, right? So from that standpoint, you have to be careful. I mean, there is a vision. It's sometimes, I think, pretty guarded by the Winnipeg Jets on what they want to do. But I do believe that everybody's on the same page at this point of saying, okay, things are going to change here. How drastically are things going to change with the Winnipeg Jets between now and October when they drop the puck for real? I guess we don't know. But there are going to be some moves here. I don't think you're going to, force Pierre-Luc Dubois to play another year here or half a year before you trade him at the deadline. And if Connor Hellebuyck wants to be moved now you can't be waiting to the deadline to move a goaltender either. The time to strike on that is now as well. So there are going to be some changes. We've always heard, of course, of Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler in that equation as well. So I think that there's a reception from the organization that things are going to be altered, as I think as much as the fan base wants that to happen. But, to what degree, I'm not quite sure because we don't know the entire vision. Now, the other thing is, too, David, that the vision has probably changed a little bit with the pronouncements that Pierre-Luc Dubois wants to trade now, and Connor Hellebuyck, who's a Vezina candidate again, wants to probably not fulfill his final year in Winnipeg and won't be signing a long-term contract with the Winnipeg Jets. So things change. Like Paul Maurice used to say all the time, you've got a game plan, until the puck drops.
Yeah, until Mike Tyson punches you in the face, right?
That's right.
The same saying, different angle on it. Paul Edmonds, the voice of the Jets on CJOB Radio, is our guest this Saturday morning. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Paulie, one of my favorite adages, of course, is time heals all wounds. Do you think that the 3 months, the 4 months of the off season since the Jets season ended and the training camp begins will be enough time to heal the wounds of the end of season media availabilities that we saw from Rick Bowness and from the players, where there was certainly some charitably a disagreement in opinion?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, they do like Rick Bowness, and he's got 1 year left, I believe, on his agreement, and he is the coach here. And a lot of fans like the way, you want to talk and bring the fans back into it, like the way he sort of engaged the market here and really sort of had a sense of accountability. And if there are some of those that don't want to be accountable and play under those rules and under that umbrella, then I don't know that much has changed. The answer to that will be, I think, stay tuned, Drew. But, there were some eyebrows that were raised and some harsh criticism both ways, I think, at the exit meetings and media availability from that standpoint. Can 4 months change a lot? For sure it can. But it also comes maybe with a change of personnel in your dressing room. That's where I think the biggest change would come from. You start moving some pieces out and moving some new people in, that changes the culture. It changes the outlook. It just changes the entire dynamic of your room as well. That being Rick Bowness, talked about making some changes last year, which he did, to allow a little bit more oxygen in the room and for things to breathe. And I think that there's still maybe some opportunity for that to be expansive this year in this offseason. But I think that, if you brought some of the same guys back that maybe were critical, certainly I think you have the offseason to work on some of those disagreements, if you will, via text, via phone calls, or whatever, to get on the same page so that everybody's pulling the same way on the rope when you get to September and October.
Paul, you mentioned Paul Maurice earlier, and obviously, you know Paul Maurice really well throughout his time with the Jets, and Jamie Compon as well. We've got Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final tonight. Huge Game 3 overtime victory with the Carter Verhaeghe goal. I guess just how fun has it been to watch, the Panthers run, considering, how close you were with Maurice and Jamie, and just, the way things ended here. We all know, we don't have to go over that again, how things ended here in Winnipeg. And I guess, do you think the Panthers are going to be able to win tonight and make this a series? Because it looked like it might be a sweep after those first two games in Vegas.
I got a funny story for you. So I came home from baseball the other night during Game 3, and my wife, on the way home, I had said, "Hey, do you have the game on?" And she said, "Yes." And we've got an interesting kind of setup for our NHL package where you can go back and watch games as well. So I get home and it's 6-1 for Vegas. And I'm like, oh, Game 3, this is going to be a sweep, and then I like, geez, I think I've seen this before. What's going on here? So it ends up, and then I get this notification on my phone because I'm just getting settled in the house. And I'll answer your question here in a second, Ezzy. But I get settled in the house, and then I get this notification saying that Matthew Tkachuk is tied it. They're going to overtime. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Anyway, so as it turned out, she had the rebroadcast of Game 2 on. And I thought that Game 2 was Game 3. So I ended up watching overtime and saw the Verhaeghe goal. So, I want to see a good series. I think that's what we've got going on here. 7-0 in overtime for the Florida Panthers is unheard of. I think I remember that last run by a Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup in 1993 was the Montreal Canadiens, and they did something similar to that. So anytime that you can win in overtime and be close that way, those overtime wins, they have a residual effect positively for you when you win them, negatively for the opposition. Listen, Paul Maurice has always talked that the Conn Smythe winner should be the guy that's standing there with goalie pads at the end of the series. And Sergei Bobrovsky's been very good. There's no question about it. But they've also got role guys like Matthew Tkachuk has really found another element in his career. He's scoring big goals. He's coming back from hits. He's an agitator as well. Sam Bennett and Reinhart, and the list goes on, and Barkov and Radko Gudas. And Brandon Montour has really established himself as a frontline defenseman. If you didn't know it before, you've certainly seen it in this series. And Vegas has their hands full. I will say this. Overall, I think Vegas is the better team. But when you have a team that the Cinderella slipper has been fitting quite nicely through these Stanley Cup playoffs, don't count them out, because all of a sudden they win tonight and the series is tied at 2. It's a best of 3. So from that standpoint, we'll see what happens. But it's been a great run for the Florida Panthers. And I know that Paul Maurice and Jamie Compon have really enjoyed it. They've been instrumental in it. This is a team that got in on the last day of the regular season by 1 point, and here they are. So, true adage of anything can happen when you get in, and they are proving that. But it's been a great series so far. Let's see what happens here tonight. And I would have to tell you that there's a lot of speculation about momentum, whether you get it from one game to another, or whether it can happen from one game in a game to continue on. I do believe there is something to momentum. But if it gets quashed quickly tonight and goes in Vegas's favor, then they might have the opportunity to go up 3-1. If you can capitalize on winning in that emotional environment that you did for Florida a couple of nights ago into Game 4 tonight, then you'll see what happens, and you'll be in good stead to maybe tie the series.
Paul, you talk about the defensemen for both of those teams in Vegas and in Florida, and we know that one of their attributes is their size and how difficult they make it to get to the front of the net, and it's become a cliche at this point, how about that. But then you look at the Jets, and the Jets would certainly be what I would describe as undersized when you compare them at least to Florida or to Vegas. As all these trade machinations take place this summer for the Jets, do you think getting size or getting bigger on the back end could be there's a premium that Kevin Cheveldayoff and his lieutenants would be looking at in terms of an acquisition?
Well, the two size guys that I like in the back end is Brendan Dillon, and he's got 1 year left.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were looking for sort of an alternate captain to the alternate captains, he was that guy. Dylan Sandberg now is an RFA. You've got to get him signed, because I like the way he played in the second half and on and into the postseason as well. So there's some size there.
Right.
But I don't have a problem with guys that maybe are undersized that can move the puck. But how many of them, and I think this is where you're going, Drew, do you need on your 6-man rotation of your blue line, right?
Right.
And so I think if you've got Neil Pionk and you've got Josh Morrissey, that's probably – your saturation point is right there. So could you use another big tree? Well, Logan Stanley is also an RFA. I mean, he didn't exactly have a great year. So what are you trying to do? Could you move him for another similar size guy? I don't know that you find a lot of 6'7" guys out there that are available, but I know what you're saying. 6'2", 6'3", not an undersized puck moving defenseman. I think that there's a balance in the National Hockey League, this kind of era that we're involved in, where you have to be kind of a defensive defenseman, but be able to move the puck. And then you have the next layer of those offensive defenseman type of guys, which Neil Pionk and Josh Morrissey can be. So to be succinct in answering your question, there is some size back there. There is some puck moving defensemen. There is some offensive gifts that are available to the Winnipeg Jets when it comes to their blue line. But I think that they could be a little bit bigger and a little bit harder to play against when it comes to, down low in front of their net, below the goal line, in and around that slot area for sure. So I think you're always looking to upgrade your defensive core. One of the things that I think that they could look for would be a larger right shot defenseman that would fit nicely into the organizational system, especially now that you've lost Leon Gavanka.
Paulie, I'm not sure. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just going to say quickly, Paul, and that kind of leads into this idea that what are you going to do with all these surplus young guys who are on the left side and are more, how you described, similar, like a Declan Chisholm, who's a phenomenal skater,
right?
But is not necessarily the biggest. He's not afraid of, he doesn't shy away from physicality, but he's not nobody's going to confuse him with Brendan Dillon. Same with Ville Heinola, who, like I said, in our exit meetings at the end of the Moose season, was phenomenal in terms of his determination. But of course, he's got the waiver exempt status for one more year. So what do you do with these types of guys? Because that's what you have really coming up. And that's the guys who are going to populate potentially your system next year.
Well, I think you have to try to make some room for Declan Chisholm. I mean, he's had some really good years down in the American Hockey League, and it's about time, right? Where he is in his age and his advancement in his career. But I think it's okay. Like Declan moves the puck and skates well, but he can defend as well. I think that if you match these guys up, if you have a Morrissey, a Pionk, and a Chisholm. If you match them up with a good defensive defenseman with a little bit more size, there's your balance, right? I don't have a problem with that. So it's just a matter of finding the right guys to fit with those guys. And certainly I think for Declan, if he does make the move to the National Hockey League as soon as maybe this year, well, it's defense being the priority for him. Although in his first game in Detroit, boy, he was up the ice, and I was quite surprised by what we saw there. But from that standpoint, I think you can find a balance with these guys. But there are some guys that are pushing from the Moose into the National Hockey League that you do have to think about making some room for them as you go along here in your organizational depth and looking what you have and trying to advance and develop those guys.
Paulie, I wanted to ask you about the C being captain, because obviously you mentioned Brendan Dillon earlier, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. I'm not going to ask you who you think is going to be the captain, because I think you and most people would agree it's going to come down to two guys, and those guys are obviously Lowry and Morrissey. I mean, to me, I think either one of those guys would make an excellent captain. And granted, there are a lot of Jets fans maybe that don't pay attention to it as much, but there's a lot of Jets fans that are curious if the team will name a C, and that's what I wanted to ask you. Are you expecting the Jets to name a captain next year, or could they go into the season, with multiple A's on the jerseys? But I do think that you would agree that we know who the candidates are.
Yeah, I think that you're going to see a captain be named this year. I think there was a bit of a feeling out process from Rick Bowness and his coaching staff to see who they had and who kind of walked around the room and who was inclusive. And one of the things that I've always talked about when it comes to leadership with kids or athletes, and that is, you want to be a raw guy and you want to be a performance guy, certainly on the ice in this particular case, but you also have to be a guy that's inclusive and bringing people along. That's the best attribute to a leader that I think goes first and foremost before anything else. Now, you don't have to be vocal, but you have to be a guy that everybody gravitates to and is polarizing for all the right reasons. And I think your guy there is certainly Adam Lowry. Everybody gets along with him. He plays hard. Everybody has the respect of Adam Lowry. And that's the other thing, too, is does he have the respect in the room? And I don't think you would find one player in the entire organization that doesn't have the respect for Adam Lowry. I think Adam Lowry
or the entire league, right, Paulie?
Well, that's true. Right. Yeah, the entire league. I think Adam Lowry will be the captain of this team. I've said it before. I've gone on record and said that. And I think it's only a matter of time before they name him the captain. Josh Morrissey certainly is going to be an assistant. And then you're going to see exactly who might be another assistant as you go along, like Mark Scheifele still is, but his status is in question, whether it's going to be a long-term contract or whether he gets moved or he wants to be moved. Like, there's all kinds of things up in the air. But the one thing that is definitive is that Adam Lowry is signed, sealed, and delivered here for the next several years. And I think based on that contractual status, his commitment to the city and to the province and to the organization, I think that Adam Lowry makes a very good captain for the Winnipeg Jets for a lot of different reasons, including the inclusivity that I've talked about.
Paul Edmonds of CJOB Radio is our guest on this Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, talking about the Winnipeg Jets, all the news, all the noise circulating around the hometown team.
Now, Paul, I'm not going to ask you to break down Brad Lambert's games in the WHL or in the Memorial Cup, but I will. I know you're a big fan of the WHL and what they can produce and what they can do for young men to get to that next level. And we saw a guy in Brad Lambert, the 2022 first rounder of the Winnipeg Jets. He was obviously playing with the pro game in Finland, started with the AHL, went to the Seattle Thunderbirds, had a phenomenal season. And one thing that I think is being missed a little bit was the fact that the move to center. I'm not saying he's going to be a center in the NHL, but even when I had Craig Eisinger on with me, a few weeks back, he said that's not something they necessarily would have seen or tried at the AHL level. So how good do you think this year has been for Brad Lambert in terms of his development as a prospect for the organization?
Tremendous for a couple of reasons. Maybe the positional switch, the ability to play on a championship team, that never hurts. Of course, you learn how to win as well, right? They always say you kind of learn how to lose. Well, you learn how to win as well when you are on good teams. I think the North American game has helped him. I think playing and learning the language of English, because let's face it, Finnish is his second language, or his first language. English was his second. Just the whole cultural thing here, I think, was important for Brad's development as well. and understanding the smaller ice surface in the game. And, you know, along the road, it's been kind of bumpy for him, especially in international tournaments a couple of times where he didn't play for Finland in some important games and was scratched. Well, that never happened. You watch the 2 games that the T-Birds played against the Ice here in that Western Hockey League final round, and he was as dynamic as they come. And that's kind of what I'm basing on. I mean, I watched all of that series on television as well, and then through the Memorial Cup. And, you know, I mean, as a team, I think Seattle probably had their worst game outside of maybe game 1 against the Ice in the Western Hockey League final, in the final against Quebec, right? Like, they just couldn't do anything right. But, you know, notwithstanding that, overall, I think the playoff run for Brad Lambert and then certainly into the M Cup was very advantageous for his career. And will he make a move now to full-time NHL status or to the professional ranks with the Moose? I think there's a possibility there, but I think that this year served him very, very well. And looking back on it, if you probably pump some truth serum into him, he would probably say the exact same thing. Where he plays, I'm not so sure. But when you skate that fast and you can read the ice as well as he did, at least at the major junior level, I think that a move into the middle of the ice probably isn't a bad situation, especially when we're talking about the uncertainty of your center ice position in Pierre-Luc Dubois and Mark Scheifele. You know, what happens with Nemesnikov? I'd love to see him get re-signed by the Winnipeg Jets because he's some nice just in case, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you're trying to develop some of these guys, and let's not forget that Brad Lambert's a right-handed shot as well. So if Mark Scheifele's soon to be moving down the road, and that's your right-handed shot defenseman, or pardon me, your centerman, then you've got another one coming up in the wings here. And you know, it's not bad to have that kind of depth looking forward when there are going to be some pieces that are probably moved in a little bit of a different phase to the Winnipeg Jets this coming season.
Last question for you, Paulie. We've talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois. We've talked about Hellebuyck. We've talked about Scheifele. We haven't yet talked about Blake Wheeler. He's arguably got the least of the 4, the least appeal on a trade market given his salary. Not to say that he can't be moved, but you know, do you foresee a situation in which Blake Wheeler returns to the Winnipeg Jets, especially given how the season ended last year? I mean, his performance on the ice during the series against Vegas was admirable. Nobody has a problem with that. He was one of the Jets' best forwards, if not their best forward during the series. But then with all the post-series shenanigans and comments and everything else, is it time to just sort of rip off that Band-Aid and move on? Or do you foresee a way he still is a member of the Winnipeg Jets come training camp?
Well, you're absolutely right. 16 goals during the regular season, and he didn't play in all the games. I mean, you know, from that standpoint, he comes back from a, let's call it a groin injury, you know, and had 16 goals. And, you know, he was one of the more hard-nosed players throughout that entire series against Vegas. I mean, you know, he kind of proved his worth. Now, is it worth $8.2 million? I'm not so sure. I mean, I can't make that determination, but there was value that you got from Blake Wheeler. Now, if you want to move him, who's out there and who's going to take that salary? And would you have to retain some of it? Those are all kinds of questions. Do I see him returning to the Winnipeg Jets for his final year of this contract that he signed? I would be 50-50. And that's not a cop-out. That's just saying, okay, well, you know, maybe there's a little bit of come to everybody moment here. And Blake says, I'd like to finish my career there. This will be my last year. We don't know that. I'm just speculating. It would be important for me to finish as a Winnipeg Jet. You know, maybe he and Bones have had some great conversations over the course of this off season. And, you know, Bones says, well, maybe I was a little out of line. And Blake says, yes, so was I. And let's shake hands and let's kind of move along. Or are you looking for something a little bit different in your dressing room? Because it was revealed that despite the fact, Drew, that he did not wear the C this past year, that he was still very influential in that dressing room, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I mean, I remember Dustin Byfuglien saying one time, it doesn't matter who wears a letter, this room is still mine, right? So, you know, that's kind of what we got with Blake Wheeler a little bit, or what was revealed at the end of the year with Blake Wheeler. I still think Blake has a value turning, I think it's going to be 37 this coming August. So, or 36 this coming August. So from that standpoint, is there still something left in the tank? Yeah, we saw that. I don't think that your skills diminish over the course of one full year that dramatically, where you couldn't put up something similar to what you did last year. I think it's just a matter of what happens in advance of Blake Wheeler, that being PLD, that being Connor Hellebuck, maybe Mark Scheifele or whatever, as to how you make your determination as to whether Blake Wheeler is part of your team this coming season or not.
Paul Edmonds is the radio voice of the Winnipeg Jets on our friends at CJOB Radio. Paul, tell Nolan to hit us a home run, one for each of the three of us. If
I will do that.
Paul,
he just walked.
He just walked.
Okay,
that's good. He's got a high on base percentage.
Yeah, better than his old man. You're right. Like, yeah.
Paul,
anyway, yeah. Thanks, guys. My pleasure.
Thanks so much for jumping on, Paulie.
Yeah, no problem.
Care.
Talk to you guys again anytime.
Okay, thank you, Paulie.
Thanks, Paul.
There he goes. Paul Edmonds joining us this morning. Great interview as always.
There he goes, and there I go. See y'all later. Gotta go.
Dave's out too. Dave's got another obligation. He's got a priority more than us on this Saturday morning. Can you believe it? I can't believe it. Ezzy, I'm shocked that Dave.
True. And my ride's already here. I got the allure of the ride.
Have fun at the bar mitzvah, Dave.
Yes.
I'm out.
Bye, Dave. We'll see you later. There he goes. Paul Edmonds goes. Dave Minute goes. It's the Ginsburg and Mindell show. About time we can drive this train home for the next hour or so. Dylan Sandberg still to join us at the bottom of the hour. Much more to come. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. Finally, the brains of the operation are alone. We don't have the hanger-on trying to ride our coattails to his fame and glory any longer. Dave Minute departing after the halfway mark of the show, and it's time for the Ginsburg and Mindell duo to drive this train home.
I like it.
I like it too. And no, all you people in the chat, I can see the comments. No, you all can't leave just because Dave left. You have to sit here and be miserable with Ezzy and I, because that's what we expect of you on a each and every Saturday morning basis.
I knew Dave was popular, but we lost like 150 people there. It's unbelievable. Like I thought, people would still stick with us with Dylan Sandberg coming up, but obviously not.
Yeah, YouTube canceled our show. I didn't know YouTube could cancel shows, but apparently they can. Just because Dave leaves, they're already threatening to pull the plug on us, which is hard to believe. Some harsh treatment by our friends at YouTube, but that's okay. Nonetheless, we appreciate Dave joining us for the hour. And yes, circumstances being what they are, sometimes things arise on a Saturday morning, and he has to depart, and we'll forgive him for that on this one time only occasion. As the topic du jour for the show, of course, had been Pierre-Luc Dubois, and it still is Pierre-Luc Dubois and his demand to no longer be a member of the Winnipeg Jets. But breaking about 30 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago, courtesy of our friends at The Athletic, the comment being there should be no confusion about whether Connor Hellebuyck has interest in signing an extension in Winnipeg. That ship has sailed. His next contract will be with a new team. So as Paul Edmonds said in that interview, clarity coming towards the Winnipeg Jets in knowing which of the core four, or that's, I guess, a Maple Leafs term, which of the four question marks this offseason of Hellebuyck, Scheifele, Wheeler, and Dubois are going to be members of the Winnipeg Jets. And it's evident so far that both Hellebuyck and Dubois have indicated they no longer want to be here or will no longer be here after their contracts expire at the end of the 2023-24 season. Can you foresee a scenario, Ezzy, where the Jets go into the season with Connor Hellebuyck still as their goaltender? Or does that need to get resolved as well in the next little bit?
Yeah, of course there's a chance, right? Like with this news is huge, and that's why we brought it up. Dave brought it up basically 5 or 10 minutes into the show.
Well,
as
it just came out right? while we were
it's this morning. It's not like this news, it's not like people have been sitting on this news for a while. So it doesn't mean that Hellebuyck's going to be traded tomorrow or a week from now or even 4 weeks from now, right? But it definitely seems like the likelihood of him being traded is much higher than it was just a few hours ago, right? And people are already speculating, and us included, by the way. And there's teams that clearly will be looking to acquire him, right? Like this just doesn't happen very often. We've talked about that. You just don't see a guy that's been nominated for the Vezina, a top 3, if not number 1 goaltender in the entire league. You just don't see these guys become available, especially in the prime of their career, right, Drew? So, I mean, there's going to be teams like, we talked about the LA Kings who traded Cal Peterson, obviously, who's now a member of the Flyers. Carter Hart, it looks like, he's not, necessarily the number 1 goaltender there anymore. You have the New Jersey Devils, who obviously Akira Schmid was a great story, and, he led them to the second round of the playoffs. But, there's going to be much more teams, in my opinion, that are going to be after him. Like, when you're talking about Hellebuyck, it's possible half the league, is calling Cheveldayoff right now. So yeah, there's absolutely a chance, Drew, that, he's a member of the Jets, come training camp and, earlier in the regular season. I mean, are you going to go down that route where, you keep Hellebuyck and then trade him before the trade deadline? Like, it seems unlikely. Well, so it does seem like a trade's coming. And also, by the way, too, it's not like, Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Jets management group just found out that Hellebuyck isn't interested in an extension. This was just made, as you said. I mean, Pierre LeBrun is the messenger here.
Well, LeBrun, right? Tahachik, and Russo are the authors of the piece.
Right. And yeah, exactly. But when you're talking about, sorry, I was talking more about Dubois there.
Right. Okay,
sorry. We were on Hellebuyck, but I was talking more about Dubois. But when it comes to Hellebuyck, sorry to switch on you there, Drew. But yeah, when it comes to Hellebuyck,
well, I was trying to think, as you talk about Hellebuyck and you talk about trading goaltenders. When was the last time a star goaltender was traded mid-season? And really made an impact on the acquiring team. I mean, the last big goal,
it hasn't been for a while, Drew. Like, I honestly, I'm struggling to.
I would say Ryan Miller from Buffalo to St. Louis. I mean, I know that Marc-Andre Fleury was traded at the deadline, but
these are guys that weren't in their prime at that point. Like Ryan Miller was, I guess you could argue he was still in his prime, but how old? He was still in early 30s, right? No, like, and Hellebuyck's a little bit earlier. I mean, yeah, I guess Miller might have been in his late 20s. Yeah. But still, like, Marc-Andre Fleury was definitely older, and even though he was an excellent goaltender, especially for the Golden Knights in that 2018 Cup final run, I mean, Fleury had already won multiple Stanley Cups, and So it has happened before, and you have to wonder, like, are we talking about a goaltender and prospects here? Because I don't think there's a trade out there. I mean, there might be, but I think it's going to be harder to find a 1-for-1 trade here. Like we've talked about it, like the likelihood of, Hellebuyck being traded for UC Saros or Igor Shesterkin, or, a lot of people are talking about the Bruins. They've already got a really good goalie in Linus Allmark, and Jeremy Swayman's also a really good goalie. So could the Bruins acquire him? Sure. I think the Hurricanes are a team that I think must be interested. The Devils, I would imagine, are interested, and for sure the LA Kings. You'd have to think that the LA Kings are interested just because they just traded Cal Peterson, and now I think he was making $5 million a year, so now they have that cap room. But I mean, it's hard to really
use that cap room already to sign Gavrikov. So I mean, their cap room is
I'm just talking about the money they've allotted for their goaltending. But you're right. I mean, they did just sign Gavrikov, but you'd have to think the Kings. I mean, that's the thing. I think 10 to 15 teams you could name might be interested in Hellebuyck. He's that good, right? Like, do you want a Vezina caliber goalie? Oh no, I don't. Why would I want a Vezina caliber goalie, right? So there's no doubt that the interest is going to be high. All I'm saying is I think it's tough to it's tough to handicap it in the sense that like who the favorite is. Pierre-Luc Dubois clearly has shown interest in going to Montreal, so the Canadians are the favorite to land Dubois. When it comes to Hellebuyck, I mean, your guess is as good as mine, Drew.
Well, and that's sort of where the Jets, again, I wouldn't say they have leverage per se, but they have, with Dubois, everyone has assumed, everyone's figured that it's basically Montreal or bust. So it boxes in Kevin Cheveldayoff. With Hellebuyck, there isn't the same restrictions. It's basically, it's not that he's said, I want to go to only X city. Likely he wants to go back to the United States. I think that's probably a reasonable expectation that his desired destination would be somewhere south of the border, which is, true for a lot of players.
The Red Wings are obviously a team that have been rumored just because he's from Michigan. But again, we have absolutely no idea. It depends. Like you said, Drew, Chevy's going to get the best possible return he can, whether that includes a goalie or not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I don't think while I can understand why you would say you need a goalie, there's no question you need a goalie at some point this offseason, because take away Connor Hellebuyck and the Jets have the worst goaltending situation probably in the entire league. They just don't have anybody ready to step into that role. But I think when you're making that trade, you're getting the best possible players back. It doesn't have to be a goalie in return. It can be you just want to get the best players you can get from whatever team, and then you can find a goalie in a separate transaction.
Dubois might be traded for a goalie, honestly. Like, it's possible that the Jets trade Hellebuyck for a center, and then they trade Dubois for a goalie, right? So you're absolutely right. It's not necessarily going to be position for position. It's really tough.
Should it be? Right. No. But you do need to, you will need to address the goaltending situation. I'm not sure what the status of Steve Mason or Andre Pavlik is at this point in time, but I'm pretty sure that that ship has sailed.
Al Montoya is available.
There you go. My tongue was firmly in cheek there, folks. Let me just make that clear. I know that sometimes sarcasm doesn't translate very well, but then my tongue was firmly in cheek there. But the Jets are obviously now going to add. You have. The priority list of this offseason, which is already lengthy to begin, now is going to include, getting a goaltender. And does that mean you get a goaltender from another team that's maybe got a disgruntled goaltender that's looking for a change of scenery? Perhaps, but that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the Connor Hellebuyck trade. Hellebuyck trade could help you address what's going to become your evident deficiency up the middle. To your point, it doesn't have to be position for position. If all of a sudden Connor Hellebuyck can get you a top center, and all of a sudden if Pierre-Luc Dubois can get you a top 4 defenseman, whatever, I'm just speculating here, folks, then maybe you're beginning to retool on the fly, and you don't have to do any of those other RE words that have been bandied about so much. There are multiple jigsaw pieces at play here, and it's incumbent on Kevin Cheveldayoff to play his hand correctly. He misplayed his hand, in my estimation, when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois. You cannot recreate that when it comes to Connor Hellebuyck. you still have a fair bit of leverage here with Connor Hellebuyck. You have a desirable asset. He is under contract. It's not like he's an RFA or anything like Dubois is. He's under contract for 1 year at a very appealing price. You can trade him, and you should be able to generate the proverbial king's ransom.
Absolutely.
Or a guy.
No pun intended.
No pun intended there, exactly. For a guy who has been a perennial Vezina Trophy winning or Vezina Trophy candidate goaltender. And just because he hasn't had the great deal of success come playoff time recently, that doesn't preclude him, that shouldn't preclude teams, I don't think will preclude teams from really getting into what's happening, to interested in acquiring him, because we've seen so many regular season teams that are trying to get over the hump, that are trying to get over the cusp and becoming a playoff team. Hello, Buffalo, for example.
Ariella is showing me the birthday card. She's going to a birthday party today,
Wonderful.
So she's showing me the card. I love it, Ariella. It's a very nice card. Say hi to everybody.
Hi,
Okay.
sweetie. Did you make me a card also, or no?
Did you make Drew a card?
Where's Dave Manouk?
Where's Dave Manouk? It's what everybody wants to know.
Dave's
Where's Dave Manouk?
Dave's went to a bat mitzvah, so he was only on for half the show.
There you go. Where's Dave Manouk? I'm here, and Ariel is saying, "Where's Dave Manouk?"
Go find mommy. I love the card. Bye.
Story of my life, right there. No, everyone's asking, "Where's Dave Manouk?" When nobody ever asks, "Where's Drew Mandel?" But my point is, for Hellebuyck, the team should be lining up and should be willing to pay a hefty price for him because of his regular season success. Team like Buffalo, team like New Jersey, all these teams that are just almost seem like the Kings, who seem like they're on the cusp of a Vezina caliber goaltender, should really make it so that Kevin Cheveldayoff has his pick of the litter when it comes to acquiring, when it comes to a Hellebuyck trade.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, we talked about a team like Carolina possibly acquiring him and maybe not re-signing him, right? Like, this isn't a guarantee that the team that acquires him immediately signs him to an 8-year deal or a 5 to 7 year deal or whatever. But you're absolutely right. This is much different than the Dubois situation. And also, as part of that, because of the fact that this hasn't been something that has been ongoing for over a year, right? Like, we know that Pierre-Luc Dubois has wanted out of Winnipeg. I mean, we've heard all the reports. We haven't heard it from Dubois himself, but now through Pierre-Luc Brun, through Pat Brisson, we know that a 1-year contract isn't going to be signed again, making, Dubois in the last year, before he becomes a UFA, right? So you're absolutely right. Like, Connor Hellebuyck is going to get an excellent return. And we've talked about it. Like, all of the big trades, Chevy has got really good returns. When you're talking about whether it's Jacob Trouba or Andrew Kopp, going all the way back to, the Evander Kane trade. But you're absolutely right, Drew, when you talk about, the Jets possibly, without David Riddick, because he only signed the 1-year deal.
Right.
And the other thing I wanted to mention too here, we were talking about, could Hellebuyck be traded to a team and a goalie doesn't come back the other way? Of course. Yeah. And the UFA market is first off, the Jets haven't dipped into the UFA market a lot to address their needs. It's been through drafting and trading. But you do have a few goalies out there that, could
it's a pretty thin UFA market. Like,
no, it absolutely is. But
the star of the UFA goalies.
Yeah, but you've got guys like Antti Ranta. You've got I was just thinking of somebody, Tristan Jarry. And again, these are not guys that are better than Hellebuyck. That's not what I'm saying. But you have legitimate number one goaltenders, goaltenders. We'll say whatever you want.
I mean, look at this Jets team though. Put Tristan Jarry in goal instead of Connor Hellebuyck for this Jets team. I mean,
I absolutely agree. I mean, they would be 1A options, right? Like, you would still have to have a legitimate backup. You're not going to go into next year with a young starting goalie and Arvid Holm. Like, that's just not going to happen. I think Arvid Holm might be ready for backup duty at the NHL level, but he's definitely not a guy that you can expect to play 40 games at the NHL level. I'm just saying that is an option here in terms of a Hellebuyck trade. I mean, it's tough we don't even know, who the teams that are really at the forefront of acquiring him are, right? But you would have to think, though, that a veteran goaltender is going to come back in a trade. But I'm just saying, I think, you probably will see the Jets acquire a goaltender on the UFA market, but it's most likely going to be for the backup role.
Well, it's the Jets without Connor Hellebuyck are a completely different team. The effectiveness of this team is completely different as well. What you need with if Connor Hellebuyck is gone, and based on that report from earlier today, you'd have to assume that the writing is on the wall when it comes to Hellebuck's future here in Winnipeg. You have to insulate your goaltender a lot better than you have over the last number of years. You can't strictly rely on Connor Hellebuyck to save the day anymore. It just doesn't work anymore.
Ruben agrees.
Ruben, that's great. I'm thrilled that Ruben agrees with me. He's very wise and very smart, so I don't doubt that in the least bit that he's making well-articulated comments.
My kids don't want me to do the show alone. That's basically what they've decided today, Drew. But
that's good.
He's now left the room, so I think we're good.
That's good. That's considerate of him that he left the room. I appreciate that from him. But if my point is, the Jets need to have a way better defense if you're going to take such a dramatic step back when it comes to your goaltending. And there's been no evidence that this Jets team as currently constructed, and we know it's going to be constructed in a sizably different manner, it has the ability to play that better defense. You have to sort of adopt the Vegas style, which is we're going to let the goaltender we're not going to have a big name goaltender, but we're going to have such a good defense that we make it easier on the goaltender to do his job, which is really the opposite of what the Jets have done, which is we're going to rely on our goaltender to keep us in games night in and night out because we're lacking in so many other areas. So that it has to be a complete think shift as to how the Jets consider their construction of their team in light of this news.
Absolutely. And further to your point, when you're talking about the defense, we know that there's going to be, some movement. We don't know necessarily who it's going to be, but we know the Jets are much stronger on the left side. And, you have a decision to make on a Logan Stanley, for example, Ville Heinola. I mean, we've talked about it. I mean, training camp is really going to determine most likely, if he sticks up with the Jets and how many games he plays with the Jets. But you're absolutely right, Drew. I mean, when you're talking about whether you call Dubois the number one center or the number two center, and then you're talking about Hellebuyck, who has been the franchise goalie now, since 2016, 2017, like there is going to be not just a switch in personnel, but I think, the way the Jets play, I don't think it's going to be, dramatic or anything like that. But when you're talking about, some of these players, Ruben wants to come back. What do you want to say, Rube? I think you're going right away. Go find mommy, okay? Ruby, Daddy's got to do the show, okay? Yeah, I told you.
They still like you. I don't think my kids like me that much anymore. I think that's the big difference. Is your kids are still interested in spending quality time with you. They want to know what Daddy's doing. They want to know where Daddy's at. My kids are like, we'll see you when you come back upstairs, Dad. It's no big deal. You can take an extra hour. We'll be fine.
Well, the funniest thing is, as you know, like you're with your kids all the time, and sometimes you want to take a break, but then when you're away from your kids for 3 or 4 hours, you're like, this is boring. I miss the kids, right? So it's kind of we're tortured souls, Drew, as parents pretty much, but it's the best thing ever. But obviously Ruben wants some more mic time now that Dave M isn't on with us. But yeah, I mean, this is huge, right? And you mentioned speculation, and there's been no shortage of speculation when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois. And now with this news coming from Pierre Lebrun and Eric D and Michael Russo, there's just going to be more speculation now when it comes to Connor Hellebuyck. Like, if you think about it, the entire hockey world is watching the Jets right now. Like, right? We've seen a few trades. We saw the 3-way trade between Philly, LA, and Columbus. And obviously you mentioned earlier the Damon Severson sign and trade, the reverse sign and trade, if you want to call it that, because the Devils signed him. But and then there's going to be movement. I mean, there's no more speculation in terms of whether or not there's going to be movement amongst the core four. Now the question is it going to be all four of these guys, as opposed to, is it just going to be one or two? Because the writing is on the wall with Hellebuyck deciding not to sign a contract extension with the Jets. I think it's, even though I wouldn't be shocked if he's a member of the Jets at the beginning of the 23-24 season, it's looking more and more unlikely at this point.
Let's take an early break. Dylan Sandberg is going to join us at the bottom of the hour, so I want to make sure that we're queued up and ready to go for Dylan. So we'll take a bit of an earlier break than we normally do at this time. Jets defenseman Dylan Sandberg coming up in about 6-7 minutes time. Much more Jets talk to come as well. It's a very busy Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Boston Pizza harnessed Fanalytics to help optimize no-look dipping. Ooh, making adjustments so you can stay focused on the game. The playoffs at Boston Pizza, powered by Fanalytics.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. We're thrilled to welcome to the program Winnipeg Jets defenseman Dylan Samberg. Dylan, good morning. Nice and prompt. I appreciate that. Are you the kind of guy who's usually on ice, 10, 15 minutes before practice begins? Because I got to tell you, in my experience with professional athletes, getting somebody 5 minutes early does not necessarily happen every day.
First of all, thanks for having me, guys. But yeah, I guess this year, especially with warming up Hellebuck, I had to get on the ice pretty early, so I guess I just got used to it.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you joining us nice and early. You mentioned, what's that like warming up, Connor Hellebuck? We've spent a lot of today's show talking about Connor Hellebuck, his future in Winnipeg. Of course, he's a year away from unrestricted free agency, but you guys obviously have that sort of close bond. How did that come to be? How did you end up getting that sort of honor, let's say?
It was early on in the year. I got on the ice early and they were looking for a shooter. So I said I'd shoot on him, and I guess he liked the way I was shooting on him, so he just decided to stick with me the rest of the year, and I started to enjoy it as well. But right off the hop, it was like, this is crazy. I'm shooting on a Vezina winning goalie, and that it took some time to get over that. But once I got over that, it was good, and it became really easy because we bond over fishing and hunting and stuff like that.
And Connor knew that you were going to keep that puck low, right? He knew you weren't going to bring it above the waist, right?
Yeah, I made sure I kept it away from his face.
Is that the big off-season activity for you? Hunting, fishing? Is that generally how you're spending the off-season, in addition to, of course, all whatever training you're doing?
Yeah, I like hunting. That's more of in the fall,
right
when I get back up into Winnipeg. But as far as fishing, yeah, I love to fish. So my dad and I are heading up to Lake of the Woods actually end of June here. Wonderful. For a nice little trip. But I also like to golf as well, and pretty much that's about it: golfing and fishing.
Not a bad way to spend the off season, I would say. But you also took a bit of a European vacation, and that was part of the reason why we wanted to talk to you. Your experience playing for Team USA over at the World Hockey Championships. I mean, those of us in North America, I don't think we really appreciate or really understand just how big of a deal the World Hockey Championships are, over in Europe. So this is your first time, I believe, at the World Hockey Championships. You have international experience playing in the World Juniors, of course, but just sort of how would you summarize your time? How would you sum up your time and the just experience in general playing for Team USA this past spring overseas?
It was awesome. I enjoyed every second of it, and it was cool. We got to see some cool places along the way. We started in Munich, Germany, and then finally went on to Finland. But any chance you can get to play for your country, it's definitely really special. And I cherish that. And I was fortunate enough that we had a really good group there that connected right away, right off the hop. And we had a really good preliminary round. The first U.S. team to ever go 7-0, which was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the medal rounds didn't go as planned or how we wanted it to go, but overall, it was a great experience. I'm glad I went.
Dylan, you mentioned the preliminary round. We have to talk about the overtime goal. I think you knew that question was coming because we were sharing that on the Illegal Curve. I think all Jets fans were sharing that on their social media accounts. A huge goal. It was against Sweden. I believe that was the game, the last game before the quarterfinals. As you mentioned, the U.S. was undefeated. Like, just take us back, because I mean, obviously, the team success is paramount, right? But that must have just been an incredible feeling for you to score that OT winner.
Yeah, it was very cool, and it was good for our team. But it was just I'm not much of a 3-on-3 guy, so I just looked at one of the guys on our team, Pernovich, and told me, because he's more of a 3-on-3 kind of player like that, and I was like, what do I do out there? He goes, just keep moving your feet and you'll be fine. And sure enough, it worked out. So
there you go. That's it seems like a pretty good 3-on-3 philosophy whenever it's happening. Winnipeg Jets defenseman Dylan Samberg, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Have you scored an OT winner before that?
I did in high school.
In high school.
That would have been the last one. Yep.
And I'm sure the feeling is just as ecstatic in high school or as a professional. When you turn around and you see your teammates coming to swarm you, it's got to feel pretty special.
Yeah, it was awesome, and it was good for USA Hockey. To see. I feel like every year we're climbing the ranks. On the world ranking there in for the Worlds, but that was a really special moment, and I was glad I was there to have it happen to me. So
obviously the World Hockey Championships, are a different animal than the NHL. You play on the bigger ice surface, all that jazz. But what can you learn from that kind of experience that then translate to helping your game at the NHL level on a regular basis? Is it just sort of sitting in the room and picking the brain of some of your teammates and some of the other players, or is there sort of nuances that you can learn from playing on the bigger ice surface that maybe subtly can translate into the NHL game?
Yeah, I feel like for me personally over there, I was able to learn more about my offensive side of my game, which was a huge help and great for my confidence. And I was put in different situations as well, which was very helpful for me. And that you have a little bit more time on the ice out there. It was kind of like between a regular sheet and an Olympic sheet. So and then kind of trying to find areas where you have more time skating away from guys, just to give yourself that extra half a second. But I feel like for me, especially the offensive side was really definitely a big boost.
Dylan, realize that, you recently got back from Europe. But we've got Game 4 of the Vegas Florida series tonight. Florida obviously won Game 3 in overtime dramatic fashion. I just wanted to ask, first off, how much of the final that you've been watching, but also you guys obviously weren't able to get past the Golden Knights. But I would imagine that you're not at all surprised that the Golden Knights are in the Stanley Cup final. I mean, they were the best team in the Western Conference during the regular season. But just what have you thought of the Golden Knights run, especially considering that that's who obviously you guys faced in the first round?
Yeah, I mean they got a great team over there, and they were tough to play against. A lot of high end players that can make a lot of really good plays, and there's a reason that they made it that far, and it's you want to be there and be in their shoes, but still fun to watch, and I'm hoping down the road we can eventually get to that point.
Dylan Samberg, Winnipeg Jets defenseman, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Now, Dylan, obviously, as you mentioned, the series against the Golden Knights didn't go the way you wanted it to. And then, of course, at the end of the season, there was, some pointed comments, I would say, from head coach Rick Bowness, and some of the players rebutted those comments. Given the end of the season, given the disappointing sort of end, how does the team sort of spend this offseason regrouping and retooling and sort of refocusing to come back next year and have improved results?
I just think we have a good team here, and everyone knows that. And, at some point it's going to work out for us. Just, unfortunate the past couple of years, with 2 years ago not making playoffs, this year making playoffs, and I think we're on the up. But we'll see what happens.
Are you in touch with a lot of the guys in the off season?
Yeah, I'm in touch with a few of them. I train here with Nate Schmidt, so I get a full year of Schmitty all the time. So, I think it's awesome.
And he's got his daddy hat on these days.
He does, yeah, which is awesome to see. He's very proud of that, and I talked to him the other day about that, and he said it's really exciting. But I talk with Brendan Dillon a lot, Neil Pionk. You have a fantasy baseball league, so you keep in contact through that.
A fantasy, you see, I was going to expect you to say fantasy football. I assume you guys have a fantasy football league as well. But are you a baseball guy more than a football guy?
I was more of they need an extra guy this year.
You're the free money is what it is.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot, and I'll be living down here in the cities right next to Target Field where the Twins play, so maybe it'll get me out to some more games.
There you go. Not a bad way to spend. It's a beautiful stadium. Not a bad way to spend a day. Mm-hmm. If it's any consolation, Dylan, I lost my first 6 games in my fantasy baseball league to start the year. So as long as you can beat that level, then you're doing better than I am. Dylan Samberg, our guest here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Dylan, wanted to ask you about your last season, because obviously that was your first full year in the NHL, and we do our post-game shows in addition to the Saturday show, and we talked about you a lot because I just thought as the season progressed, you just continued to get better and better and better, and you mentioned Brendan Dillon, and it seemed like he took you under his wing, not to mention some other players that took you under the wing, but especially on the back end there. So just can you just kind of for you, like, what was it personally, what did you feel like, how did you progress throughout the regular season, and obviously getting your first taste of the NHL playoffs?
I felt like I progressed from the beginning of the year on, and I just felt more confident the more I got to play. And we had a really good group there, and everyone's, especially in the back end, everyone's pulling for everyone. And, nobody is ever afraid to reach out if they need anything or want to ask any questions. But, especially with Dylan, Pionk, Schmitty, they're, always asking me, talking with me, and I just felt more comfortable as the year went along. And, within the good group that we had, it made it a lot easier. And I felt like I relaxed more, started to play, just try to play sound defensively. And, I felt like I progressed as the year went on.
You talk about that, and your progression as the year goes on. Is it sort of a gradual where the game sort of slows down for you when you get your, first real consistent taste of NHL action? Or is it just sort of one day snap and then everything sort of slows and you begin to sort of process the game like you would have, let's say, at the college level or when you were really comfortable in a role on any team that you previously played on?
Yeah, I think it's more of like a gradual thing, I would say, for me at least. I just just learn every little bit about the game day by day, whether that be in practice, in a game. And I just feel like the more you're in certain situations, the more comfortable you feel down the road. And I felt like that was very helpful for me.
In terms of a off-season priority, you mentioned that playing overseas allows you to sort of playing at the World Hockey Championships maybe allows you to focus on a little bit more of an offensive style of game. Is that something you're looking to sort of fine-tune a little bit? I mean, you really sort of settled very nicely into that role that you were playing as a physical defenseman for the Jets, but still with some upside on the offensive side of things. Is that something you're looking to as a priority this off-season?
Absolutely. I mean, I always want to work on my offensive game, anything I can do to help contribute. And, I feel like the coaches all year are always harping on the D to, join the rush and, break out your offensive side more and be comfortable with being in the offensive zone. And I feel like that's definitely a big thing for me this summer, is just focusing on the offensive side of things and, being more comfortable in the offensive zone. And I felt like the World Championships really helped me with that.
Dylan, I wanted to ask you about Josh Morrissey, because obviously he's been a great defenseman for a long time for the Jets, but this was, above and beyond that, putting together a career season. Should have been nominated for the Norris, but we're not going to get into that. But I mean, this is your opportunity to just gush about Josh, because I mean, what he was doing on a day in day out basis, it was kind of, I mean, and there's a lot of good players on the Jets, yourself included, but you kind of ran out of things to say about the way Josh was playing. It was just incredible. It seemed like, he had 2 points every single game, but just what did you see, being on the ice with him this year? Because he was just, I mean, I think the word incredible doesn't really, do justice what he was doing on the ice this year.
Yeah, no, he's a great player. And, he was fun to watch and like learn from. And, at some points in the year, you just sat back on the bench and you're sitting back and you're watching him. You're like, this is unbelievable what this guy's doing. And he just plays with so much confidence and he plays free. And you can see that when he's out there. And he's a great player for us. He had a great year and, great guy, and can't say enough good things about him.
Well, Dylan, the business side of the game is never that far away. And of course, for the first time, you are a restricted free agent this offseason. How are you approaching that? Are you sort of just out of sight, out of mind, and you'll get a call from your agent one day and that'll be that? Or is that something that you are sort of, you're aware of and it's at the forefront as you're going through your off-season experience?
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to be aware of it, but I feel like for me at this point, I'm just, my main focus is next year and what I can do to come into the season a lot better and stronger, and what I can do to elevate my game in certain points. And I mean, the contract that'll come, but at some point, and just try not to worry about it too much right now and just focus on how I can get better.
Sorry, go ahead, Drew.
I was going to say, go ahead, Ezzy. I'll ask after.
No, I was going to, ask a more lighthearted question as opposed to Drew asking the hard-hitting contract questions, Dylan. But you mentioned, you're close with Nate Schmidt in Minnesota, training with him. I was going to ask you, when are you going to be available for babysitting duties? Are you going to wait until Harvey's a little bit older?
I don't know. I'll have to ask Schmitty, see if he'll let me be around Harvey.
If you need any kids to practice on, both Ezzy and I have young families, and you're welcome to come over and babysit for our kids as a test run before Schmidt Nate's kids, if you want.
Yeah, I might have to, because I don't think I've ever.
I think Dylan's got better things to do. Drew.
I would hope so. I think golfing, fishing, and hunting both sound more appealing than any of the options we've brought up so far. Dylan, a couple more, and then we'll let you get on with your Saturday morning. We really appreciate your time. I'm sure you're not a stranger to the noise and it's on every team, so it's not a unique to Winnipeg thing about players coming and going. And when the season ends, there's always going to be new faces in the dressing room, and guys that have been there before won't necessarily be there at the start of next year. How do you sort of handle that? Do you just realize it's sort of part of the business? It's nothing you can control, or do you just sort of, are you sort of glued to the news regarding guys that you've been teammates of yours for a long time?
Yeah, it'll definitely be different. It's different every year. Over the past 3 years that I've been in pro hockey, I've seen a bunch of new faces, which is obviously exciting. You get to meet a lot of new guys and build a lot of friendships, which is great. But some of the guys it might be weird because you've been around for 3 years and then you might not see them. But I think we got a good room, and whoever comes in, I think will flourish.
There you go. It's good. That's good to hear. I'm sure Jets fans appreciate that assurance from you, given the way the season ended last year. Because that's the problem with pro sports, or the reality of pro sports, is that at the end of the year, with the exception of one team, there's probably about another 31 teams that are a little bit disappointed with how everything turned out. That's the reality of it all. Dylan, we'll let you go on this last one. I was reading up on your bio, and obviously I'm familiar with you, but I got to tell you, what I did not know is that you are a super fan of Dude Perfect. So, and that would be, according to the good folks at USA Hockey, that is something that you would be looking to do if you weren't a hockey player, is be doing trick shots with Dude Perfect. Is that right?
That would be really cool. That is definitely on my bucket list. Yeah, I remember, this goes way back. I've been watching YouTube videos of them for a long time, but no, I enjoy the trick shots, and even during COVID, when we were up here, I set up in Winnipeg during the season. I set up some pots and pans and did some ping pong trick shots. So
successfully,
yeah.
Okay,
yep, I have a couple videes. So
there you go. That's the important part. You got it.
Nice.
Something we all had to do weird things during COVID. I think that's
exactly
what we're learning about there. But as long as you got some success out of it. But yeah, those guys are pretty cool. I would agree with that. Dude Perfect, definitely. Unfortunately, on this Saturday morning, you got 2 duds instead of a bunch of dudes. But we appreciate you nonetheless.
How long has Drew been sitting on that one, Dylan? I feel like he's had that one in his back pocket for a while now.
He dug that one up. Yeah, I don't know.
I tweeted about it also, so I'm just reusing my tweets in the course of the conversation. But I appreciate you guys willing to humor me as I get my not so funny puns out in the course of this interview. Dylan, we really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the off season. When do you head back to Winnipeg? Do you know yet, or is probably still some time?
Not entirely sure yet, but somewhere early September.
Well, we look forward to catching up with you again real soon, and hit it straight. What's the handicap?
I actually I downloaded this app called 18 Birdies because I've never known my handicap before. So I usually play around a 2.
You don't know your handicap and you're a 2.
Yeah, I've never actually done my handicap. So one of my buddies told me I got to download this app. So I just played my first round on it the other day.
Wow,
it's funny, Dylan, because Drew and I combined are 200, so you have us beat by 198.
Beautiful.
Dylan, thank you, buddy. Have a great rest of the summer, great off season. We'll catch up again real soon.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Care.
Thanks a lot, Dylan.
Dylan Samberg, Winnipeg Jets defenseman, joining us this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. That was a great interview. What a beauty he is. Thanks so much to Dylan, and of course,
what a great defenseman,
Winnipeg
too.
Jets PR team for setting that up with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, Dylan was being, humble there when we were asking about, his last season and scoring the overtime winning goal for the U.S. And I mean, Dylan said it himself, right? I mean, he wants to go far in the playoffs, as the rest of the Jets do. But it's been amazing since he was drafted in 2017 to see him develop, right? Because Dylan put in his time with the Moose, played 2 years with the Moose.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, we've talked about it, right, Drew? We weren't kidding when I said that to Dylan, right? Like, he has established himself as a member of the top 6. You can just pencil him in on that left side. So good for him.
I think
really nice guy, and just a phenomenal hockey player.
I think a lot of people would say that the Winnipeg Jets need more defensemen like Dylan Samberg. We talked about it with Paulie Edmonds in hour number 1, Ezzy, where you look at the Jets defense, they have the puck movers, in Morrissey and, Pionk. Obviously, we know what the struggles and the chaos that has been Neil Pionk's game for the last couple of years, but the Jets need just more, I would say. And I'm not, I think the
different styles. What you're talking about, I think, is different styles. It's not, I mean, we've talked about this so much, right? When you're talking about size, like, you can't just look at this in a vacuum and say, the Jets need more defensemen that are like 6'2", 6'3", like Dylan Samberg, right? Like, it's not that easy because, for example, Neil Pionk, who's considered smallish at, Pionk 6 feet, but he plays a physical brand of hockey, right? So whether you're talking about defensemen or forwards, like Alex DeBrincat, I mean, I think you would agree that if you redid that draft, DeBrincat goes way higher, and he's become a perennial 40-goal guy, right? So, like, just because, or look at a guy like Lane Hudson, who the Habs drafted, I think, 62nd overall. Craig Button has said this before. I mean, if Lane Hudson was 6'3", he might have gone, 2nd or 3rd overall. Looks like the Habs have a steal there in Lane Hudson, right? So, I think when you're talking about the Jets defense, you're looking for, the perfect mix. And I think, that group, including Dylan Samberg, led by Josh Morrissey, and then you throw in Nate Schmidt, Brendan Dillon, Neil Pionk, and Dylan DeMello. I think it's a good group. But I think that, you're looking to find the right mix of, skill, size, physicality, puck moving ability, all that stuff. Right. So, it'll be interesting to see if we see any movement, but there's no doubt that, on the left side with Morrissey, Samberg, and Dillon, I mean, I have no problem with that left side going into next season.
No, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of appeal there. It's a matter of, the right side is obviously the area of concern for this Winnipeg Jets team. I mean, there's lots of areas of concern for this Winnipeg Jets team, as we've outlined on this Saturday edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We know that Pierre-Luc Dubois wants out. We now know that Connor Hellebuyck isn't interested in signing a one-year contract or signing a contract extension with the Winnipeg Jets, which probably puts a pretty decent shelf life on his future here in Winnipeg. Don't know yet about Mark Scheifele. I mean, that's still sort of I still think Scheifele ends up as a member of the Winnipeg Jets still. That's my inclination. That's my hunch.
Jets would love that. I mean, that would be music to Chevy's ears, Drew.
Well, and then of course and then what do you do with Blake Wheeler? And I'm of the opinion, as we talked about last week and on previous weeks, that you just can't have Wheeler back in the room anymore. And look, I mean, I asked the questions of Dylan Samberg, not expecting him to really give an answer or make waves with his answer. I appreciated his answer, but I didn't expect him all of a sudden to start, roasting his teammates or anything like that, folks.
No,
but just
all players, Drew, in all sports, whether it's hockey, football, basketball, baseball, players, they're not going to
torch each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, and it's incumbent on us to ask the question, regardless of what the answer is going to be.
Well, it's what every Jets fan is thinking, right? I mean, like every Jets fan that watched, Game 5, and then the comments from Rick Bowness after Game 5, followed by the comments of Blake Wheeler. Clearly, there was a disconnect between the players and the coaches, and I have no idea if Wheeler's going to be moved or a buyout is an option that we've talked about as well. But clearly, I mean, if Wheeler isn't going to be traded, this is most likely going to be his last year with the Jets. But you wonder, like, you could use that there would be a lot of cap space freed up if Wheeler wasn't on this roster.
Well, look, the Jets, I mean, the cap space isn't an issue for the Jets, for this season. It's clearly not going to be something that, I mean, they have $13 million in cap space right now, and they don't have what I would describe as anybody that is a difficult signing, assuming Dubois is not going to sign here, so you don't have to worry about that. Of course, if they acquire RFAs, that might change things a little bit. So cap space won't be an issue for the Jets, but it's time that Wheeler just moves out so you have to start changing over the dressing room. There's just no question about it. You can't be Blake Wheeler's team anymore. And it still was last year. They tried to make it so that it wasn't when they removed the captaincy from him. And that was an admirable way of going about it. But it's evident that it's still his team. And what I'm curious about, as much as, I'm most curious about what happens with Mark without Blake Wheeler around.
We've never seen it, right? Like, and that's the thing. Like, since Scheifele has come into the NHL in whether it was 2012, 2013, I forget, since he became a full-time NHLer, Wheeler's been there. I mean, Wheeler's been a member of the Jets organization since it moved to Atlanta. He's the last guy. He's the last Thrasher.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's it. There's no more Atlanta Thrashers on the Jets after this. So, it's going to be weird, but I think, to your point, Drew, you have to do what it takes to move this team forward, because the last couple years, the Jets have not moved forward, right? Like, it's been, missing the playoffs 2 years ago, getting knocked out in the first round. Mm-hmm. You have to change. You have to change more than just one or two players, right?
You have to change more than just the guys who have indicated they don't want to be here anymore.
Exactly.
Dubois, he doesn't want to be here. It's his prerogative a year from now to not be here. So he's telling you ahead of time again. He's already told you, but he's telling you again. So now it's incumbent on you to trade him. Hellebuyck, unrestricted free agent a year from now, same thing. He can choose his destination. Good for him. He's saying it's not going to be Winnipeg. He's not leading you on. He's not playing footsie with you. He's saying it's time for me to go, and I'm going to go. So it's time for the Jets to make that trade happen. With Wheeler, again, it's run its course. Everything has a shelf life. At some point in time, this show, maybe it'll be 20 years from now, maybe it'll be next week, will have run its course. Some would argue
I hope it's next week, by the way.
Some would argue it ran its course 5 years ago, and we're still here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've been washed up since that 2017-18 run, Drew.
Quite possibly, and that's an argument I'm willing to listen to. But
we definitely peaked.
Yeah, eventually it will run its course, and people will move on, because that's what happens in life. It's just unavoidable. So the Winnipeg Jets, the organization, and for whatever reason, they seem to refuse to acknowledge this. And maybe it's a money issue. Sure, could be that they don't want to pay a guy to not be here. And I understand that. And it's not my money. So far be it from me to tell them what to do with their money. But at some point in time, it's addition by subtraction. And until Blake Wheeler's domineering presence is no longer front and center within the Winnipeg Jets dressing room, it's still going to be Wheeler's team. And we know it can't be Wheeler's team anymore and expect there to be legitimate success for this roster. It's just, the writing is clear. The evidence is clear. You tried to run it back again. You made the playoffs, but you can't just overlook what happened for the last half of the year and think that, by removing your best player in Connor Hellebuyck and removing Pierre-Luc Dubois, one of your star players, is going to solve the problem. It's more than an on-ice performance issue.
Yes.
It just is, which means it's a dressing room issue, which means it's the domineering presence in the room is the one that needs to go.
And just putting the contract status aside, right? Last year of his contract with the Jets, and putting aside kind of the locker room dynamics and his leadership abilities and everything like that. Like, to me, it's just that he's in between, what his usefulness is at the NHL level, right? Like, we've talked about it, right? Like, he's not that dominant first power play guy anymore. Can he produce? And that's the craziest thing, is that he had 6 points in 5 games against the Golden Knights in the first round, and he was arguably one of the Jets' best forwards, right? So I'm not diminishing Blake Wheeler. He's had an excellent career with the Jets. All I'm saying is, with Kyle Connor, Nick Ehlers, and especially with the acquisition of Nino Niederreiter, you've got Cole Perfetti. That, like, to me, those are your 4 wingers in the top 6. And Blake Wheeler is not a guy, I think, that you want playing necessarily a third line role. Like, could he do it? Sure. But it's just it's not the role that you ideally want him in. And I think if the Jets were a team that was low or lacking talent, then you would say, you have to keep Blake Wheeler because the Jets don't have, a lot of other options when it comes to the wing. But that's where the Jets are strong. It's up the middle that you're concerned with right now because of, Pierre-Luc Dubois most likely being traded in the short term, right? So I think that's part of it, right, Drew? Like, I think nobody's like, what did Blake Wheeler have this year? 55 points, 60 points. Like, he was good. That's not it. It's not just about goals and assists and, Wheeler being able to get it done. Of course, I mean, Wheeler, is a fantastic passer on the power play, and he can also rip some goals every so often on the power play, but it's not about that. It's about moving your team forward. This is Adam Lowry and Josh Morrissey's team now. It's not
Kyle
Blake Wheeler's
Connor's
team anymore.
It's Nikolai Ehlers' team. It's Dylan Sandberg's team. It's time for that new. I mean, these guys aren't young players anymore. They've been around forever, it seems like. But it's time that it no longer is Blake Wheeler's team. And I know that, and you know that. And it's incumbent on the Winnipeg Jets to recognize that, because otherwise you're going to be in the same situation. The way that press conference and look, if the Jets, we've talked about it. If the Jets season ended in 5 games and they lost game 5, 4-3 to Vegas, and there was no controversy in the media, in the end of season media availabilities, then people would say, okay, whatever, we can bring Wheeler back for another year. But the way that he shivved his head coach, I just don't know how both of them can coexist in the room together. And I know there's been instances where players dislike coaches and coaches dislike players. It happens. I understand that. But the Winnipeg Jets aren't good enough, as currently constructed, to overcome that. They just aren't. So you have to do one of 2 things to fix it. You have to either remove the coach, which in my estimation would not be the right decision, because I don't know that any other coach comes in and can handle Blake Wheeler and his temperament. Or you remove the player. And there's a number of players on this roster who I believe are ready to step up and try and re-envision the team. There's that word again. They're going to re-envision the team in the dressing room and how they approach the game and how they deal with it. But they can't do that while the glass ceiling of Blake Wheeler's leadership still exists. So the Jets have a number of things they have to work on over the course of the next, 3 weeks, because that's really what we're talking about. It is 3 weeks from today, folks. That's Canada Day. That's when free agency is in the NHL. Saturday morning, July 1st, Canada Day, free agency, Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Set your reminder. But the draft is a few days before that, and the trades are going to happen. They're already happening in a lot of other cities. So now is the time for the Winnipeg Jets to make those hard decisions, to rip Band-Aids off. The buyout period opens when the Cup final ends. Well, the Cup final could end as early as when they play. They play tonight, and then they play again Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. The earliest the Stanley Cup could be awarded is Tuesday.
Well, there you go. I think 48 hours after the Cup is awarded is when the buyout period starts, which means that time is coming very soon. And it's incumbent on the Winnipeg Jets to react and act accordingly with the various moves that are swirling around this organization.
Absolutely. And I said this last week, Drew, so much has changed in the last 2 weeks. So much has changed in the last 2 hours when it comes to, LeBrun, Russo, and Duhachik putting out their article in The Athletic saying that, Hellebuyck is not going to be signing a contract with the Jets. So now, it's looking more and more likely that, all 4 members of the core 4 are going to be moved, right? I agree with you. It's looking like Scheifele would probably be the best bet to stick in Winnipeg, but there's going to be big moves. There's no doubt about it. And it's just a question of when it's going to happen. And, are all these moves going to happen around the same time? I don't think that's going to happen. That the trades are going to happen within 2 or 3 days of each other. I just think when you talk about the magnitude of the players, when you're talking about Dubois and Hellebuyck, and obviously, Wheeler wouldn't be considered in that same breadth. But when you talk about being the captain and spending the last 12 years with the Jets, that's a big move to make. I think it's a trickier move to make, and you're not going to get the same return that you get for players like Hellebuyck and Dubois. But there's no doubt, Drew, that this is a transitional year for the Jets organization. It's a huge year for Chevy, and it's going to be really interesting to see what type of package they get back, especially for, as I mentioned, Dubois and Hellebuyck. But I think, Jets fans are ready to move on. I think, we talk to Jets fans, we see the chat, every Saturday show, every post-game show, and there's an appetite for change. Things have not worked out well the last couple of years. Jets fans want to see a new direction. They want to see a new vision. They want to see this team, go deeper into the playoffs. Paulie Edmonds said it, right? The Panthers almost missed the playoffs, and they're 3 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup. I do think Vegas is going to close it out. I think it's going to be really tough, for Florida to win 4 of the last 5 games of the series. But the point is that, if you get in, nobody expected the Panthers to beat the Bruins. So I think if Chevy makes the right moves, and I think he will make the right moves, the Jets can easily be back in the playoffs next year. I think a lot of people are worried about the goaltending situation, rightly so, because you're not going to get a Connor Hellebuyck back in return for Connor Hellebuyck. It's just not going to happen. But you have to get a goaltender that's going to be able to give you at least 50 to 55 games. But it's going to be a much different Jets roster for the 23-24 season. And, it's exciting. It's exciting to cover. It's going to be sad to see guys like Hellebuyck and Wheeler go. Obviously, Dubois hasn't been a Jet for that long. It's going to be sad to see him go, but especially Hellebuyck and Wheeler, because they've been such a big part of the Jets' success, over the last decade, essentially.
We will bring you all the latest, of course, here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show and illegalcurve.com. Whenever news breaks, that those are your 2 destinations for all your latest Winnipeg Jets news. Want to say a big thank you to all of you for joining us, and of course, all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the post-game show, the Saturday show, and the website a possibility. Our friends at the Rady JCC, the 2023 Rady JCC Sports Dinner is coming up in 9 days' time. Chris Chelios, Ed Belfort, Jeremy Roenick, plus all 3 members of Illegal Curve will be on site. If you haven't got your tickets yet, what are you waiting for? The best sports dinner that happens in this fine city of ours is the Rady JCC 49th Annual Sports Dinner coming up on Monday, June the 19th. Get your tickets now, radyjcc.com. I know that there are limited tickets available, so if you want to hear from those three legendary Chicago Blackhawks, Chelios, Belfour, Roenick, get your tickets now, radyjcc.com. Also want to say a big thank you to our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club. Looking for something to do on this Saturday night or tomorrow, a special Sunday show as well. Check out Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, rumorscomedyclub.com. Our friends at Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty. I'm having coffee with Frank on Monday. I'm looking forward to catching up with our good buddy Frank Zappia.
Little cappuccino, Drew?
A little cappuccino, a little latte. I'm not sure which, but I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it regardless. Our friends at Betway, they're the title sponsor of the post-game show. Tough Duck, hardest hitting comment that happens on the post-game show. Our friends at Boston Pizza. Great to run into Andrew from Boston Pizza at last night's Bomber game. Remember, news to come on that front. Illegal Curve live on location for the post-game shows at Boston Pizza. More details to come when the schedule is released and over the next couple of
more pizza
months.
For me, Drew. That's all I care about.
There you go. You're getting paid in pizza, I believe, is how it's working there at Ginsburg.
Absolutely.
Our friends at Seagram's. If you're drinking this weekend, please drink responsibly. Rolly's transfer as he's still under the piano. Dear God, somebody help him. Grid Park and the Keg support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve hockey. Big thanks to Paul Edmonds. Big thanks to Jets defenseman Dylan Samberg. If you missed either of those interviews, if you missed any of the show, there's an immediate replay on YouTube, and the podcast will be up a little bit later on this afternoon once Dave M is back on his Illegal Curve duties. We gave him a little bit of a pardon, a couple hour conjugal visit that he can go use instead of being here with us on this Saturday morning. But we appreciate all of you being with us. It's been a great show. It's been a ton of fun. If you haven't already done so, smash the like button. Remember to leave us feedback on the YouTube channel. Leave us feedback on iTunes. We want to know what you think about the show here, there, and everywhere. We always like to hear from you good folks. Whatever you're doing this weekend, please do it safely. For Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow at Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.